everyone. My name is Cassandra Chin, and today I'm talking to Kat Cosgrove.
Hi there. My name's Kat Cosgrove. I am a SIG Docs technical lead for the Kubernetes project and also the owner of the Kubernetes release team subproject.
And I've known you for quite a while, and I feel like you're technical, but everything you do just looks fun.
Thank you. I try to make it fun so that I burn out a little bit less quickly.
And I thought that it would be helpful for other people to know what fun things you do with tech. So that's why I wrote up your section in Raising Young Coders.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. It was an honor. It was very sweet of you.
So what are some of the fun things you did while growing up with tech?
So my dad is a software engineer, or was. He's very retired now. But in my house, there was never a thing about girls not doing computers. So I always had access to one. I had a computer when I was very, very young, my own computer, and basically unrestricted access to the internet, which in retrospect is not maybe a great thing. But my dad always encouraged me to experiment and get weird and play video games and mess around on the computer. I got into building PCs pretty young, which I still like to do. I still build my own desktops. I don't buy desktops.
How did you start that? Did you just wake up one day and say, I want to build my own PC?
I wanted an Alienware, and we could not afford an Alienware. This was before Alienware was purchased by Dell, and they had these very, very cool looking enormous cases that looked like an alien head, and I really, really, really wanted one, but could not afford it. So my dad told me I could build my own, which at the time was a little bit more difficult than it is now. You have to be more careful with hardware. Back then, you really needed to be concerned about things like static electricity back then, so that you didn't short your motherboard while you were building your computer. You don't have to be that careful anymore. I do not use an anti-static strap today because I don't care, and things are better shielded. But the machine was overkill. For sure, because I was mostly playing emulated Super Nintendo games that were never released in the US, like the Sailor Moon RPG. There was a ROM of that with an English translation and a few other anime games.
I actually also grew up building computers with my dad.
Yeah.
I think my first built computer was when I was 4 years old.
Oh,
I just put the screws in, but
that counts.
you can see the graphics card, the motherboard, and all the components.
Yeah.
And you just start to internalize what computers are.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as hard to build as people think at first. It's kind of just you plug the thing in where it fits for the most part now, at least. Though I'm still scared of putting in CPUs because they used to make, at least Intel CPUs, used to make an absolutely horrifying crunch when you close the lever, and it sounds and feels like you have bent all of the pins. They don't do that anymore, and also I use AMD CPUs now, which are less scary to put in, but putting in CPUs used to terrify me.
And I think from my book, not everyone can afford a full-scale PC, so I generally recommend doing a Raspberry Pi because you can still plug in the ports for the monitor, the keyboard. It's like a mini motherboard.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fully functional computer. It's just limited in power and memory and storage space, but there are a lot of really cool applications for Raspberry Pis. Pretty common to build arcade emulators out of them. It's a relatively common newbie project for a Raspberry Pi. That's a pretty accessible thing. Cool.
I think we almost ended up building a full-scale arcade with a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
But that got put on hold.
Yeah, some people run Kubernetes clusters on Raspberry Pis. I did that for work when I was still an engineer. So you can do a lot with those little things, especially now.
I think you enjoy cosplay.
I do. I enjoy cosplay. I got into that, I think just because I was a weeb when I was a kid. I still like anime a lot, but I was a weeb.
Well, I'm definitely a weeb.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I started going to anime conventions when I was 12 or so. The first cosplay I did was Tifa from Final Fantasy VII, which in retrospect, probably not the best choice for a 12-year-old to be dressed as Tifa. But I did it once. It was the Middle Tennessee Anime Convention in Nashville, and then kind of just never stopped doing it. Back then, it was like relatively simple anime costumes, things that I could make out of a trip to Walmart, pretty much. But as I got older, they got more and more complicated and started involving like cosplay armor and electronics.
I think even now, like, cosplay's gotten so complicated, but you need to own your own 3D printer.
You need a 3D printer. Increasingly, you need like one of those resin printers. You need to be considerably more, you need more money and more resources to be like a good cosplayer than you used to, I feel.
But it's kind of interesting. It used to be like more on the fashion side, but now it's really going into tech.
It's very engineering heavy. Like an increasing number of like popular cosplayers, professional cosplayers really are using a lot of electronics in their builds, not just for lights and stuff, but for making things move automatically, which is very cool. But it's important to remember, if you are trying to get into cosplay, you're not going to be able to replicate what the cosplayers you see on Instagram are doing, because they are professionals that are often being paid by a company to build that. Like, it is their full-time job to build those things.
Yeah, but I think even if you're not that experienced, like, you can print something simple and
Yeah,
you can just put LEDs into cardboard.
yeah, you can introduce electronics and 3D printing and stuff into cosplay as just like a regular person. Also, lots of people on Etsy sell 3D printed props, which I think is very cool, and it makes doing a really good looking cosplay much more accessible. And you can just buy a 3D printed exact replica of your character's like weapon or like their hair things or whatever, instead of having to make something by hand yourself that looks kind of bad maybe out of air clay. Speaking from experience of having done some like really shoddy looking cosplays when I was younger.
Yeah, I actually did a little bit of cosplay myself in high school. I decided to dress up as Diva from Overwatch.
Oh, that's adorable though. That's cute. I did Genderbent McCree from Overwatch. What is he called now?
Cassidy.
Cassidy, yeah. Genderbent Cassidy from Overwatch.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you did some video game modding before.
Yeah, video game modding is very much a thing that it's become more accessible over time. It used to be something that was like exclusively for like very, very weird nerds. But as it's become more popular, I think I probably credit most of this to Skyrim, honestly. It's gotten more popular and easier to achieve, and more game companies are just like outright supporting it, like explicitly, which I think is very cool, because it used to be something that you had to force upon the game. There was some like reverse engineering involved to figure out how to make these modifications, even for little stuff like HD textures or something was not something that the game company would support. But Bethesda seemed to just embrace it entirely, which I think is really cool. Now there's a whole community around making video games.
I had a friend who did enjoy Skyrim and modding, and now they're doing computer science.
Yeah.
So I think there's a
drug, I think.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think my like connection was I started on Minecraft and I had my own Minecraft server, and just like configuring the server, like a lot of it is on a terminal.
Yeah.
You have to do like file management and YMLs. You're basically put your foot in tech at that point.
Yeah, I think that's a gateway for a lot of people around your age. And I think that's cool. I worried a little that technology becoming so easy to use would mean that there would be no more of that. There would be no touching low-level aspects of a computer, of technology, as a consequence of using it. Like when I was a kid, if you wanted to do voice chat with somebody that you were playing like Counter-Strike or World of Warcraft or whatever with, there was no built-in voice chat in the game like there is now. Instead, you had to use Ventrilo or TeamSpeak, and both of those required like some level of understanding of like how computer networking works just to set up the server. It wasn't just like a join a chat room type of situation. And for a lot of us, that was also a gateway to understanding more about a computer.
I think things are a little different now. I see more people who are like non-technical just playing video games regularly.
Yeah, because it was definitely something that was for the weird kids for my generation. Like playing video games did not make you cool at all. It made you weird. You were relegated to hanging out with the nerds if you played video games. And now it seems like there's much less of this like nerds versus jocks thing. Everybody plays video games. Maybe we credit that to like the popularity of Call of Duty with frat boys in the early 2000s, or like FIFA or something. But yeah, I like that now you kind of just assume everybody plays video games to some degree. Like nobody's going to look down at you for playing video games generally. Maybe they look down on your choice of video game, like there's something about League of Legends players or Overwatch players. I am an Overwatch player and I'm aware of the stereotypes. But nobody cares that you just generally play it.
You just play what you enjoy. I don't think it's that big a deal.
It's not that deep. No.
And you said that you have made your own websites before.
Yeah. When I was a kid, the internet was very different, and we didn't have things like WordPress or Squarespace. This was also before social media, so you didn't have like a MySpace page or a Twitter page or a Facebook page or whatever. Instead, you had a GeoCities or an Angelfire, and these were kind of like a precursor to a Wix site, I guess. It just, you got a URL like geocities.com/whatever you want, and you built yourself a little website. It was really, really common and popular back then to build fan sites or whatever for like your favorite TV character or your favorite movie. And we all just kind of did that. It forced you to learn HTML. This was before CSS existed as well. So all of the making it pretty, you had to do like in line with HTML. And a lot of the HTML tags we used back then don't exist in the HTML spec anymore. So if anybody with control over the HTML spec is watching this, bring back marquee tags for nostalgia. Just like as a bit, I think it would be funny. Bring back marquee tags.
I think website development is still there. Like when I wrote my Fitbees AI friend book, I had to host a website with all the workshop instructions.
But it's different now. The way it works now, you can build a much prettier, much more complicated website with less effort, because there are all of these like frameworks for static websites or services that stand up the website for you with a pretty template on it, and you just drop content in with a what you see is what you get editor. We didn't have any of that. It was just like you give it an HTML file and that's all you have.
I think there's still a skill set to it, because using someone else's framework, like the more custom you want it, the more you have to learn like how they laid out the folders.
Yeah, it's both easier and more difficult, which is just a consequence of what happens when you introduce abstraction layers to technology. Like some problems that you're trying to abstract away are no longer there, and so it's easier, but there's a complexity involved in adding an abstraction layer that can make things a little bit more confusing for new users at first. So it's a trade-off. Our websites were simpler to build, but harder to build, and they were also hideous. Like so ugly. Like so ugly.
Yeah, I think whenever I talk to you, you always have so many things which are fun.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for chatting with me today.
Happy to be here.